Hello and welcome to this tutorial where I'm going to look into how we can add NPC dialogue into our game world in Crayta. So NPC dialogue is our opportunity as a game designer to use characters, non-player characters in our game to deliver information to our players. And that could be telling stories, that could be some instructions on how to play the game or on what certain items might do. And it could also just be jokes and puns, all important stuff for our players to enjoy when they come to move around our game environment. So we're going to look at a few different ways of doing this. The first one we're going to look at is using a widget. So we're going to write our own widget to have some text appear when a player talks to an NPC. We're also going to have a look at Stuart's NPC dialogue package, which you can download from the community and install into your game. And it's a very simple way of getting NPCs to talk to the player with no coding whatsoever. You just have to write in what you want them to say. And then we'll have a look at Ekelrock's text adventure package, which is a little bit more technical to set up than Stuart's package, but it offers a lot of great opportunities for expansion and diverging narratives and dice rolling and all the rest of it. So a few different ways of doing this, and hopefully one of them will fulfill what you need to add dialogue, NPC dialogue to your game. So there's different tools for different jobs, and I thought it'd be good to highlight how there's several ways of doing the same thing depending on things like what your technical skill is like and what you actually need to achieve and how quickly you want to achieve it. So without further ado, let's jump in. I'm going to be using advanced mode because I'm going to be doing this bit of widget coding at the beginning, but the other two methods don't involve any coding at all. So if that's more your bag, you might want to skip ahead to those chapters. So let's get started. Firstly, I've added an NPC into my game world already, and I've customized the NPC. Let's look at adding a widget which makes it look like this NPC is talking to us. So I'm going to firstly add a locator. So I'm going to click and drag a locator onto the NPC in the world tree. You can also just click and then click on what you want. So click on the locator and then click on the NPC in the game world. With that locator selected, I'm going to change the name of it to be NPC Dialog. And I'm going to add, let's just move up to their head. And now I'm going to add a widget to that. So with the locator selected, I'm going to click Entity, add UI widget, new UI widget. And we're going to call this the NPC Dialog widget. There we go. So that's now added, and I can see it's kind of half over their face. So let's rectify that first. Let's change to the rotate tool. Press F2 on your keyboard or select that button there, and just rotate it so that it's facing the same direction as the NPC. Now let's press F1 or the move tool, and let's just move it so that it's like a speech bubble that's coming out from the side of them. The proximity to the NPC is quite important. It should be near the NPC to make it look like this NPC is the one that's talking to us. Now with that widget selected, we need to change the wording that's within there. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to edit this asset by clicking that locator, scrolling down to the NPC dialog widget, and then clicking edit this asset there. When I've done that, if I scroll down inside here, I can see we've got data, this create.js model here on line 65, and we can see that it's got the sign title and sign text, and that corresponds with sign title and sign text. So you know what we're going to do is we're going to change sign title to be the text that I want to deliver on this widget. What should this captain say? Avast. That sounds like a good piratey term. Avast. Yeah, just simple, bold, elegant. Let's leave it as that. And then I'm going to use the text underneath that, the sign text here. I'm going to use that to say who this is. So Captain Cabin. Captain Cabin says Avast. And there we go. If I save it with Control S, now that I've changed that, I can see that I have almost like a speech bubble coming out the side of the captain. So There we go. That's a really basic starting point. We can go a little bit further than that though. It's quite a good idea to make an NPC like this interactive so that our player feels like they are actively talking to that NPC, and also so that it's not getting in the way when the player doesn't want to talk to them. So to do that, what we need to do is click on that dialogue, that NPC dialogue locator again. And we're going to add a script, entity add script, new script. And this is going to be called my widget toggle script. And let's go into that script. So scroll down in my entity editor, find that script and click edit this asset. So in here, I'm going to create a property which is going to refer to the widget that is attached to this locator. So let's add a property called widget, and the type is widget asset. And we need two functions whilst we're coding in here. We need one that says show, so a show function, and we need one that is hide. And when we run the show function, we want to show this widget. So we can refer to this widget by getting hold of the locator that this script is attached to by using self.getEntity. Then we use the function findWidget, and we pass in between the brackets a reference to the widget asset that we want to find that's attached to this locator. So we want to find NPC dialog widget, and so this line of code should be able to do that. And when we're running the show function, we actually want to show that widget, so we can use :show, which is an inbuilt function into a widget. Similarly, we can copy this line of code, just paste it in here within the hide function between hide brackets and end. But rather than show here, we're going to change that to hide. So we've got show here and hide here. Before this will work, we need to select which widget this widget toggle script is referring to, because we could have multiple widgets on this locator. So if I now click on this drop down, I should be able to see NPC dialog widget there. And so now those two functions should work. So now it's time to hook them up to be able to call them. And the way we're going to do that is by selecting our NPC. So now we're selecting our NPC, not the locator, the NPC themselves. Use the new binding button on the onInteract function there. And the entity that I want to interact with the entity that I want to call is the NPC dialog locator. It should pre-fill that widget toggle script, and the event I want to fire is the show event. So by doing this part, hooking it up to the onInteract function, it means that when a player walks up to this NPC and interacts with them using the interact button, it should now show the widget. But that's not going to look like it's doing anything unless we hide the widget first. So finally, let's hide that widget. Click on the NPC dialog locator one last time and scroll down to the widget, NPC dialog widget, and uncheck visible. Make sure you're not unchecking visible on the dialog itself. Make sure it's only on the NPC dialog widget there. So not on that bit. Make sure it's on that bit. And that should technically work. Should we try it? Let's try it. I'm going to press F5 to preview. I'm going to sprint up the beach to my NPC, talk to them. Hey, avast, says Captain Cabin. Cool. That will stay up forever, or until I close the game. So one last thing, which I think is a bit of a nice finishing touch to this, is actually to add a trigger to the NPC. Let's move it up and make it a bit bigger. So 400 by 400 by 200 is a good size. And when the player exits the trigger, that's when I want to make the widget disappear now. So with that trigger selected, I'm going to choose the bottom on trigger exit binding. Let's click new binding here. Let's drag on that NPC dialog widget locator again. Make sure the widget toggle script is selected, and then choose the hide function. So now when I run up to my NPC, so Captain Cabin says Avast, and now when I walk outside of that trigger, it hides the widget. I can walk back up to the captain, interact by pressing E or X on a gamepad, and then if I move back away from that NPC, it should hide the widget. So it feels like you're walking up to them and talking to them, and then you're moving out of earshot, and it's kind of like this widget is kind of representing the sound. It's representing when you would be able to hear this person talking. So it's a nice way to add that element without necessarily actually, having the sound to do it. Now you could add even more to this. You could add maybe an emote when you interact with them. Using Russ's NPC system package is an easy way to do that. You could add sounds that play and all sorts of things. That's a little bit beyond the scope of this tutorial. One other thing I'd like to look at with this particular method is this problem where we have Captain Cabin, and let's copy and paste Captain Cabin and put this NPC over here. Let's just change it to be Cook. But now let's just turn on our NPC dialog to see what we're working with. We can see that this Cook is now saying exactly the same thing that the captain is saying. And that's not ideal. And what's worse is if I go into my widget and change this to be, I don't know, Cookie the Cook. I feel like the cook is called Cookie. Save that. Cookie the Cook is saying Avast. But now the captain's called Cookie the Cook. So we've got a problem here where this widget is the same for both. It's the same for both Captain Cabin and Cookie the Cook. So in order to fix that, rather than us writing our content in this create.js model function here, let's use the new feature, the properties, the new UI widget properties feature. So I'm going to delete this property and I'm going to create a new one called property. And this is going to be called NPC name equals quote marks NPC dialog, type equals quote marks string, end open tag, and then end tag like this. So we have less than symbol property name equals NPC dialog in quotes, type equals string in quotes, greater than symbol, and that's the opening tag of our HTML, and then we've got the closing tag of property. If you want more information on how to use UI widget properties, there is a quick guide and a tutorial. The tutorial is on how to make an art gallery, but it really goes into how to use this properly. So we're just going to copy and paste this property, and the second property we're going to call NPC name, and just save that. Now that I've saved that, if I have my locator selected and I scroll down in the widget, in the entity editor over here, within this NPC dialog widget section, we can see we've got NPC dialog and NPC name. So I can change NPC dialog to say Avast, and NPC name for this one, this is Captain Cabin speaking. So I'm going to change the NPC name to Captain Cabin. And now if I click on Cookie the Cook and go and look at Cookie the Cook's NPC dialog, look, notice that the asset properties are empty. So let's say this person says, hello there, me hearty. Ahoy, ahoy there is a lot more appropriate. Ahoy there, me hearty, exclamation mark. And their name is Cookie the Cook. Don't ask me to write your script, please. This script's leaving a lot to be desired. So we've got different, now we've set this up, so we've got different names and different text for each of these two NPCs. And you can see them changing when I choose each of these. But it's still the same on the widget. So let's add that last bit. Let's let's change the widget. So rather than it using data.title in this content section here, it should now be using properties and NPC dialog is the name of the property we want for that first one. And then properties dot NPC name for the second one. And there we go. We've got Avast, Captain Cabin, and Ahoy there me hearty, Cookie the Cook. So yeah, and so because we've done that thing with the triggers and the interact binding, they're on by default now. Yeah, I need to make sure that they're not on so that we can talk to them. Last thing was just to uncheck visible on those widgets. So we've got that one and we've got that one. There we go. Otherwise they just stay up. When I exit the trigger, they'll hide, but it's better if we've got these two characters so that I interact with the captain. He says something, move away, interact with the cook. He says something, move away. And there you go. You've got talking NPCs in your game. So you can have some conversations and follow along with the story. Now that's the way to make your own. And that's a good starting point. You could go into customizing that and then really exploring those widgets and ways of adding multiple pages of text and things like that. Or you can actually go into the community. Let's install the NPC Dialog package by Stuart. Here we go, SF Crayta. So let's install that package. And let's add an NPC over here. Maybe this NPC is up on this thing. And they're kind of in the shadows. Back here a bit. There you go. Let's make this NPC a rapscallion. Here we go. Perfect. Okay. So we've got the rapscallion over here. Let's use Stuart's package for this one. So this is the NPC dialog package. So with this NPC selected, I've installed that package. Bear that in mind that I installed the NPC dialog package by SF Crayta. And we can see that that's come down in our packages. We can see it's here. And there's a whole bunch of stuff in there for like running quests and all sorts of things. But what we really want to focus on to keep things simple and for this first kind of foray into NPC dialogues. Foray is a word I'm going to use there. That's fine. The script that we're really interested in is we've got NPC dialogue, NPC generic dialogue. That's what we want. So we can use that one. That's what we want to use there. So with this NPC selected, let's click Entity, Add, Script, NPC generic dialogue. And let's put the name. So this NPC we'll call Rapscallion because they're Rapscallion. The interact message. Now, if you've got prompts set up in your game world, then you can enter interact message here, and that's what will come up when you look like you're going to interact with this NPC. So for my interact message, chat to Rapscallion is going to be my interact message. And in generic text, I'm going to add some dialogue. There we go. I've asked their landlubber. I know more about the sea than you. It's quite combative. That's okay. And let's add another page. Look, if we click this plus button, we can add more pages. Oh, you know about the sea? I feel a rap battle approaching. ... To be continued. Oh, the cliffhanger is intense. Okay, so I've added some stuff. I've added some text. I've named the character and I've added my interact message. Before this is going to work though, I need to go into the user template. So click on the drop down up here and go to this user template. I've just realized it's still up there. Click on user, click entity, create child, script folder, and we need the user NPC dialog script folder. And it should come up like this, and you can see how the widget looks, how the NPC dialog widget looks. Let's go in there and let's just tweak it so that instead of the background being this color, I'm just going to make the black background color black. So we can now go in and we can edit our CSS and we can tweak it and add different fonts and all of that kind of thing. And there we go. We've got a really nice looking widget. Let's see it in action now. So I'm going to press F5 to run the game. Notice that I didn't have to bind this one. I didn't have to bind it to the onInteract. It should automatically just work if you've added that as a script on an NPC. So I walk up to the NPC. If you look in the bottom right corner, you can see it says press E to chat to Rapperscallion, which is when I wrote the chat to Rapperscallion bit. So I'm going to interact with Rapperscallion. And Rapperscallion says, avast there, landlubber, I know more about the sea than you. Now, the difference between my widget that I coded myself and this widget is now I can't move. And so I'm locked into this conversation until it finishes, which could be a desirable thing for your game. Another thing that's different is I can press E to continue, and there's a prompt telling me to do that down the bottom. And when I do that, there's a second page. So I can add as many pages as I like of this person's dialogue. Press E to continue. And once I've finished all the pages, I can now freely move about again. And I can go back and chat to Rapperscallion as many times as I like. So that's another way. And that involved no coding whatsoever and no hooking up events. So that's another way of approaching NPC dialogue and being able to do it with multiple pages. And the last way I want to look at is using Ekelrock's text adventure package. So let's add another NPC. Here we go. Add an NPC over here. Let's change this NPC. I feel like this NPC needs to be someone quite different. There we go. Perfect. And let's change this NPC to be Clipper. There we go. Cool. So this is Clipper. Yeah, we could name this character, couldn't we? Let's first, whilst we're thinking of a name, let's go and download the Ekelrock's text adventure package. So I'm going to look for text adventure package. There we go. Text adventure package by Ekelrock. Let's install that. And now that that's installed, there's a couple of steps we need to follow to set this up. Firstly, go to the user template again, and this time we're going to click entity, create child script folder, and we need to add the user text adventure script folder. So that shows you what that widget is going to look like when we're talking to this NPC. And so with that script folder still selected, make sure that you uncheck start on init unless you want some kind of cinematic opening. We are going to use this as a way to talk to NPCs, so we don't want to automatically have that come up because we haven't spoken to anyone yet. So we just need to uncheck that and then stop editing template. That brings us back to the game world. Now, the NPC, the text adventure package uses a slightly different approach to having these conversations. So firstly, I want to add an empty locator to my game world, and I'm going to call this text adventure step. So that's my locator, which you can see there. And with that locator selected, I'm going to add entity, add script, and I want to add the text adventure step script. Now there's loads of settings and there's an amazing guide on forum.crayta.com. You can go and check it out that Ekelrock wrote to guide you through how to use the text adventure package. I would strongly urge you to go and explore just how much you can do with this. But in the meantime, let's just use it to have some kind of very cinematic conversation with the NPC here. So I'm going to position this locator where I want my player to stand when they're conversing. And I'm going to move my drone camera, which is by holding right click and then pressing WASD, E and Q to go up and down. I'm going to move this drone to somewhere which feels like I can have a nice conversation with this NPC whilst probably looking at their face as well, making sure they're nice and in the middle of something like that, making sure they're in the middle of the screen. Let's press I just to get an idea of what that's going to look like. I want a little bit of plant in there, so I've moved my drone into this location. Now I'm going to add a camera into my game world. So I'm going to click and drag on camera and just add it as a child of that text adventure step locator. And then with the camera still selected, click on move to drone, and the camera is now going to be positioned and rotated exactly as my drone is looking. So it will show the same point of view that I'm currently seeing with my drone here. Let's go back to that locator with the text adventure step script on it, because I now want to set my step camera to this camera that I've just added. So I'm going to click and drag that camera into step camera. In my text settings, I'm going to use the header text for the name of this character. So this could be first mate fee. And the body text here, I know they look like a captain. They shouldn't really be first mate, but you know, I don't know ranks in the Navy. Again, don't ask me to write your dialogue. So the body text is going to be what first mate fee says, and first mate fee is going to say ahoy hoy. It's another way that you can introduce yourself as a sailor. The sea is mighty cold today. It's such a the weather. That's such riveting dialogue from our NPC there. Okay, that's all I'm going to do, I think, for that bit. Now, the options text is what I might want to, how to proceed as the player. So the options text is what I could say in response, and that's something that's different from Stuart's to this one. For Ekelrock's text adventure allows us to set what the button is going to say when we want to progress to the next page or leave the conversation. So I could say it is indeed. I could add another option to say cold ? That's not cold, implying that we have experience of even colder seas. What's the player's motivation here? Who knows? Anyway, there we go. So I've added some dialogue. One more thing I can do is move player to locator, which means that the player will snap and stand exactly where this locator is. So if I wanted to set up the scene, that's a nice way of doing that. Let's try that out. I'm going to press, wait, I need to hook up the onInteract method of our NPC to the text adventure step. No, I need to, ignore me. I need to, with the NPC4 selected, or this NPC selected that I want to talk to, I'm going to click Entity Add Script, and I'm going to add the Start Text Adventure script. And this is going to be, I can choose whether to start on collision, start on trigger, but I'm going to choose start on interact. So check that box. And the first step, so what step do I want to hook this up to? The one that I've just been working in. So I'm going to click and drag that locator and put it in the first step box there. Let's try that out. I'm going to press F5 to run. And let's go and talk to First Mate Fee up on deck. So if I interact with First Mate Fee, my camera pans to exactly where that camera was. I've got some nice vegetation hidden behind the box there, so that looks pretty cool. Ahoy hoy, the sea is mighty cold today. It is indeed cold, that's not cold. And I could carry on branching that conversation there. For full details on that, check out Ekelrock's guide on the forum. And that's it. That's our multiple ways of adding NPC dialogue to our games. We had our kind of write your own method using widgets by with these two characters over here, which is fairly straightforward, just using the UI widget properties. We had this method over here where I installed the NPC dialogue package from sf_Crayta, and this gave me this kind of approach to looking at to talking to this NPC. Multiple pages, nicely laid out and tweakable using the CSS. And finally, we looked at Ekelrock's text adventure package, which is a really good way of adding a little bit more depth to our conversations with NPCs, and even being able to progress the game in some way or unlock new weapons or whatever you want to do with it. And we can also respond in different ways to this character too. Hopefully this has been a useful and interesting tutorial on how to talk to things in your game world. Remember, whilst I have hooked this up to NPCs, there's no reason you can't use these same methods to talk to inanimate objects. Maybe you want to talk to a well or something else. I don't know. It's your game. It's your game world. You can go as surreal as you like. Yeah, have a hoot, explore. I look forward to chatting to your NPCs in your games in Crayta.